Hey there, I'm Brandon, and this is the Dirt Church Devotional. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like God was asking you to do something, prompting you to do something, say something, go somewhere, but it just sounded so crazy, so outrageous, and quite frankly would make you so uncomfortable, you passed it off, you said no, and you've wondered ever since, was that God? Would he really do that? Well, there's a story in Mark chapter 11. And Jesus, you got to understand, Jesus is heading down to Jerusalem. This is like the last week of his life. This is actually Palm Sunday. He's getting ready to go into Jerusalem. And as he's getting ready to go in there, he stops and he tells a couple of disciples, he says, hey, go on into the town ahead of us and you're going to find a donkey, untie it, bring it to me. If anybody stops you and asks you about it, tell them the master needs it, they'll send it. Seems simple enough. But come on, let's think about this. This is kind of like Jesus saying, hey, I want you to go out, and he's not going to say this, by the way, but I want you to go and stop by the first bar you come to and grab the first Harley you see and bring it to the church. Or stop by a farm and grab the first tractor you see and take it to your pastor. It's about that crazy. Okay, because a donkey at the time was more than just a pet, and it was more than just something. It was a tool. It was transportation. It was a money maker. It was valuable. Okay, and so Jesus asking these guys to go down there and get this donkey. This was a pretty big ask. All right, and yet they did it. The Bible says they went down there and they untied the donkey, and as they were doing it, the owners came out and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they said, "Hey, the master needs it," and they let it go. Here's a couple of things about this story that's really interesting. One, I think we say no to God an awful lot because, well, we just don't think we're qualified. We just don't think we're not that smart. We don't know that much. We don't feel like we've been called into vocational ministry or something. Do you realize we don't know which two disciples this was that Jesus sent? I got a hunch. We make an assumption that it was one of the 12. We might even justify that it was James and John, and Jesus was trying to cool them down after they wanted to call down fire and after they wanted to, sit one at his right and one at his left. And he was just saying, hey, I'm going to mellow you guys out. But there's no evidence that it was even one of the 12. There was a whole bunch of people that followed Jesus from the beginning of his ministry until the end. And he could have sent a couple of random individuals. We don't know. You don't have to have some special call on your life to be obedient to God. Number two, I think we fail a lot of times because we don't understand the task. We want to know the task and what it's for. The Bible tells us that they didn't realize until after Jesus was glorified. That means after he was dead and buried and raised back to life. Perhaps even after he ascended into heaven. They didn't realize that it had been written, that it had been prophesied that he would show up in Jerusalem riding a donkey. They didn't know they were fulfilling prophecy. And so a lot of times what we don't know stops us. Don't let that stop you. Jesus is good about asking us to do crazy things, make us uncomfortable. But he never asks us to do something that doesn't have a point or a purpose. And now you might be asking yourself or asking me, well, how do I know if it's God? A couple of things to help in it, all right? Number one, you got to get to know God. And how do I do that? By being in the Word. You want to hear from God? Get in His Word. Read His Word daily. You got to get it into you so He can get it out of you. The more you read His Word, the more you're going to understand Him. You're going to understand the way that He acts. You're going to understand. You're going to be able to figure out, wow, does this sound like something God would do or wouldn't do? The better you're going to begin to recognize His voice. Back in the day before we had caller ID, I knew if it was my wife, who was my fiance at the time, calling me, because I recognized her voice. I didn't have to see her. I recognized her voice. And the same thing with God. The more time you spend with Him, the easier it's going to be. Number two, get into fellowship. Get into a church. Join a Bible-believing, Bible-preaching church and get fed. But don't just get fed. Be a part of it. Be used. Be responsible. Be accountable. Get other Christian friends and you can bounce ideas off. Learn from them. The Bible also says he who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. So you're going to be like those that you hang out with. And so do those two things, chew on that, and the next time Lord asks you to do something crazy, step up and do it.